Ahoy! Brimstone Sands and tons of changes are coming to New World. If you're anything like me, you may be wondering if it's worth returning to the game, if these changes will keep players long term, if these changes will be interesting for you personally. I hope that by the end of this video, you will have an informed answer to that question. I'll talk about all the new things that we can expect with Brimstone, then also what the devs are planning for the future, and also what potential I believe these changes have for New World's long-term survival. All the sources I worked through are linked down below by Baggins TV, Danny TV, New World fans, and the official New World channel, and I'd also like to credit them for some of the gameplay footage that I'm using in the background. So it comes with Brimstone Sands. A massive new zone with a new dungeon, a new weapon, a new ultimate ability, so to speak, we'll get into that later, new gems that have massive impact on how the game will be played, and various other changes that we'll go into more detail about now. Let's begin with the zone itself. You can actually see a map here that was leaked a while ago. Brimstone Sands will be approximately 3 times as large as most current zones and will have 9 fast travel points across, so it is definitely a massive zone. The primary enemies in the zone are the corrupted Roman Legion, but we also see other familiar enemies like, for example, Varangian Knights. Along with this zone comes a new settlement that you can capture and control, so there will be wars specifically in Brimstone Sands. There are also a variety of new resources that can be gathered, for example, cactus, sandstone, brimstone, and more resources that we yet have to learn about. There are a bunch of new mobs. The ones that we know so far are scorpions, lions, new lost, corrupted, and ancient mobs, and Hellmouth. In Brimstone Sands you will also find acid pools, and if you stand in them too long, they cause acid burn, a new effect that chunks away your health massively with a damage over time effect. The new weapon coming in this patch is the Greatsword, a two-handed weapon that scales equally with dexterity and strength. I'm not entirely sure what the scaling numbers for that will be compared to other weapons, but this is something we haven't seen before in this form. Very, very interesting. It has 2 mastery trees, Onslaught and Defiance, and each has its own passive. You activate this passive by using an ability in that skill tree. So, if you use an ability that is in the Onslaught skill tree, it puts you into the Onslaught stance, which is called Path of Onslaught. This increases both your damage dealt and taken by 20%, and makes your heavy attacks charge twice as fast, but also makes them consume stamina. If you then use a defensive ability from the Defiance tree, you go into Path of Defiance. This reduces the damage that you take and deal by 20% each, but also gives you access to Guard Point, which blocks incoming attacks while you are charging heavy attacks, which is honestly insane, especially because the Greatsword can also block projectiles. I will do an in-depth weapon breakdown for the Greatsword very, very soon, so if you would like to see that and you want to learn more about the abilities and perks, then please consider subscribing. But for now, I will say that I think this weapon sounds really, really fun, especially if you like bruiser playstyles, defensive playstyles, tank playstyles. This weapon offers so much that honestly, nothing has offered in New World so far, so I'm really, really excited for the Greatsword. The new dungeon is called the Ennead. Danny and Baggins actually had the chance to play a part of this dungeon early, which you can see here. This dungeon comes with 3 bosses, and the enemies are a mix of ancient and I think beast enemies. I will say that visually, I don't think it sets itself apart that much. It kind of looks a bit like Lazarus with a bit more open space, some corruption and some Egyptian elements added, but the enemies seem to be fairly distinctly different. This is the only instanced new group content that was announced. There are no other dungeons or raids of any kind. The new player experience will be entirely revamped up to level 25. This is something the devs have already been working on in the past. They have, for example, introduced the Varangian Knights, but now we'll see a much more sweeping change in that regard. Along with that, also come full visual updates to Everfall and Monarch's Bluff. Monarch's Bluff is turned into something that resembles maybe an old castle or a medieval settlement, whereas Everfall, as New World fans describes it, will have a more unique colonial appearance. The changes for the leveling experience aren't done with that though, stay tuned for that later in the video. Before that, we need to talk about Runeglass Gems. These are gems that are upgraded from current gems that you already own via stone cutting. They can get additional effects, and the currently existing effects are punishing and sided, and these seem absolutely insane. So it appears that you maintain the original perk of the gem that you upgrade, And you get this additional perk, and in case of the punishing perk, that is an additional 50% damage to your melee attacks. Now we don't know too much about them yet, but at the moment you can actually slot them as defensive gems as well, which means you could stack a ton of them, which I imagine will not be the case. I imagine there will be some restrictions, maybe you can only have one or so, and I imagine one part of the goal of these will be that people don't switch out their gems because it would be too expensive to do so. The sided version of the Runeglass Gem provides 50% range damage at the moment. So again, I don't think you could stack too many, otherwise you could just one-shot everything if you have a full armor set of them. And as we're already on the topic of runes, there are also the so-called Heartgem Runes, which are literally a new ability for every character. So this has a specific slot where you can put the Heartgem Rune in, which is an item that can have different additional effects, different stats as well. There's not just one version of them. And this can be enabled in a fight after dealing or taking enough damage. While unconfirmed, I'm assuming healing will stack them as well. Currently, there are 5 known Heartgem Runes, and I will talk about each one of them because they're all cool. The first one is Cannon Blast, which summons a cannon and fires a powerful long-range shot that deals 100% of your rune damage. The second one is Detonate, which charges yourself with explosive energy for 3 seconds and then detonates, dealing 100% rune damage in a 5-meter radius. The third one, which I think a lot of people will like, is Heretic's Fall. This makes you fly up into the air and then smash back onto the ground, and you stagger enemies around you while dealing the rune damage in a 3-meter radius. Stone Form allows you to harden yourself with layers of stone, cleansing all crowd control debuffs and granting immunity to both stagger and crowd control for 5 seconds. This is especially strong for squishies who are being engaged on. And last but not least, Grasping Vines summons vines around you that deal rune damage and also root enemies within a 5-meter radius for 3 seconds. And again, these can all have additional perks, which we'll explore more in the future, that provide you with additional benefits on top of what they're already doing, so these can be extremely strong. The new content will be coming onto the public test realm in September in multiple stages, the first stage being the overhauled starting experience, the early levels, and the Greatsword, and the second stage being Brimstone Sands itself, whereas the actual update will be available in October. But the devs also talked a little bit about the future. They're planning to apply the revamped leveling experience to levels beyond level 25 after they gather feedback from the changes that they have made now. They also want to improve the influence race before wars, and while they have no open world bosses planned for Brimstone Sands, they do say we might get a glimpse of an enemy that you might fight in the future while in Brimstone Sands, but that's all they will say for now, which honestly to me sounds like they're trying to hint at a future raid boss. They are also planning to apply very aggressive and honestly very overdue changes to territory ownership. They're saying that at the moment there are problems with economic balancing, shell companies and crafters being left out. So they want to do multiple steps to change that. The first step being the money being spread around even more, so their statement is that you will be able to be competitive by owning a territory like Reekwater. And in the second step, the most important one here, they want to really crush down on shell companies, like secondary companies that companies make to hold more territories at once. You will have a cooldown on when you can join a war, and in addition to that, there will be a minimum number of players from your own company being required to defend a territory. They don't know the exact number yet, but they're saying it's likely 35 players or more. Additionally, they also seem to have plans for crafters that can't access their favorite tier 5 crafting station because of wars, but they didn't specify that further. Aside of the future plans, we also should mention what is not in Brimstone Sands. There will not be a level increase, according to what we have been told so far at least. There is no mention of any sort of combined gear sets or other ways of sorting your items better yet, at least. And from what we know so far, there don't seem to be any sweeping changes being applied to any PvP mode. So is that enough to revive or rescue New World? Well, that depends on your perspective, I would say. I do believe that based on the changes we're seeing, there is a very good reason for a lot of players to return. I think I am going to be one of them. I think there are very interesting changes here that motivate me to try out the game and at least try out the new zone and maybe play through it, and who knows what I'll do after that. But I don't see this as the savior update of New World. As far as we can tell, there isn't really much new repeatable content outside of a single dungeon, so I don't think people will stick around long term for that. The devs are giving us a very clear signal by not making this an expansion either. There is no level gear reset for everyone basically, where everyone starts on even ground. There is nothing else that would indicate that this is something that will massively boost the player base back to its old numbers. It is just a big update that brings us some nice things. But I do believe that exactly these nice things may just be enough of an incentive for people to come back at least for a while. And I do believe that especially in the beginning, for the first month or so, Brimstone Sands will be extremely fun because there's going to be tons of PvP happening as well, because everyone is going to be in this new zone, everyone wants to explore that, and I am going to be there for that part for sure. I was originally fairly pessimistic when it came to Brimstone Sands, and I'm still not on the level of Copium where I believe that this is bringing everything back. But again, I think it will be fun for a little bit, and maybe that's all I need. And it helps that there also aren't really any big releases at the time anyways, so might as well play it. If you want to know more about my opinion on the Greatsword and the Heartgem Rune, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified once that comes out. Thanks for watching, Duke out.